Um, I was excited because we had just landed in Israel the eve before, and we were getting ready to start our tour. And what I really look back on the fact is that because the way it was scheduled, we did not go to the quote first Christian locations per se, and we went directly to Independence Hall. And for me now, I really celebrate the fact that we had that experience first, because that gives the Christian the opportunity to make the connection with the spiritual reality with the historical perspective and bring it all together. So in that room, you know, where you're sitting there and then they begin to play the audio tape of what took place and transpired. So, you know, it gives you the ability to go back, you know, to May the 14th on a Friday at 4 p.m. and you've got, you know, the council there and you got the executive and everybody's there. And Ben Gurion gets up and he begins to read off the, you know, the Declaration Independence Statement. And everybody is there and it puts you there. And, you know, so suddenly you are connected with it and it's almost as though you're in real time in Independence Hall in Israel, you know, 8 hours before the British mandate is about to, you know, expire. And it just gives you this euphoric rush. And that's what I experienced. So after, you know, everybody is filing out and we're, you know, continuing to tour the museum, you know, I just kind of took a moment to go back. And of course, you can't sit in the chairs, but just to be able to rub my hand across the nameplates, you know, of David Ben Gurion and Golda Meir, really gave me an opportunity to really connect with the secular reality and how vitally important it was that, you know, you had both the secular combining with the spiritual, bringing forth the modern state of Israel. You know how in Isaiah 66, he says, can a nation be born in a day? And here we have a vivid model of an actual modern state of Israel being born on that particular day and seeing the fulfillment of biblical prophecy and how it took both, you know, God and man, so to speak, working together to see the outworking of Israel becoming a modern, legitimate, independent state. It literally came alive for me, Stan, because, you know, I had spent several months kind of being prepped and about the history and everything, but then to actually go to the physical location. And then so you've got all the Bible scriptures we've been reading over the years about the Jewish people returning to their homeland. And then you've got the historical perspectives of everything that took place throughout their existence. And this one museum, this one location. And so when you get up in there, and I don't want to sound hokey, but for me, I felt the presence of God there. As a Christian, as a believer, I felt his presence because I saw his promise actually manifesting in that location, even though it had taken place decades before I got there. In that setting, and I think the fact that you know, the Jewish community in Israel had the presence of mind to always continuously play the audio tape of that particular meeting was just something that really made it that more a real experience for me at that time. That room for me was the first moment because it was my first scheduled site to see that was Israel. And it wasn't in a deserted location. It wasn't in the Garden Tomb. It wasn't in the Knesset or anything like that. It was right there. And that is the starting point for me for the modern state of Israel. That's the place. You know, it's a museum. And, you know, sitting right there in Tel Aviv on Rothschild Boulevard, I believe. I mean, just, you can't get more nostalgic than that. But there was when I began to have an appreciation for modern Israel, in addition to biblical Israel, as I'd always heard, you know, coming up and having a grandfather as a pastor and a father being a pastor and brothers that are pastors and myself now a pastor. But that was the place where, as I said, I was able to make the connection between, you know, the spiritual and the historical. And that particular room I believe, births that experience. You know, that same scripture, I don't know why I keep going back to Isaiah, it says, as soon as Zion travailed, she brought forth her children. So that travailing that the Jewish people had experienced over the years, which to me is akin to prayer. But not only prayer, you know, we also have the scripture that says faith without works is dead. We don't just need to have religious experiences over Israel. We need to have prayer, faith, combined with work, action, taking action. And when you have that kind of experience, you walk away saying, okay, now what can I do? Because I am now an independent witness that Israel is vibrant, Israel is real, it's alive, and it's not just something over there, quote, in the Middle East. As a child, it wasn't as in depth, you know, because most of what we learned about Israel and the Jewish community came straight out of the Bible. But you know, as I progressed, going on into high school, and at the time that I'm starting hearing about the stories of the horrific Holocaust period and everything that took place, you know, against the Jewish people, then you know the dots begin to connect with one another. And so in my personal studies, after I got involved in the ministry, then I became very well versed in everything that kind of took place to bring the Jewish people to that moment. So you know, I believe that education is so very, very important. When I came back, you know, to Nashville, my hometown, my whole life had changed, and I had a message to everybody that I could grab, Christian or otherwise, say, listen, you've got to go to Israel. There are many angles that one could take looking at that experience, but personally, you know, I come out of a background with a strong Christian heritage. So I grew up in a household where, you know, my wife jokes me about this because, you know, in that generation, many black families had three pictures in our house. You know, you go in the living room or you go in the bedroom, you know, there's a picture of Jesus on the top, and then you got John F. Kennedy on one side, and you got Martin Luther King on the other. You know, it was kind of like our trinity. But you know, I really believe that in that generation during the 60s, we had to keep in mind was the fact that it was an incredible time of civil unrest. And I think that where Jews and blacks begin to kind of be separated from one another had to do with, I think probably, which was the rise of black nationalism, or the rise of Malcolm X and the message that he was heralding at the time before his assassination, that kind of set a wedge, I think dropped a wedge, because there were many people that felt that, you know, blacks were being steered towards Islam, and as a result of the message that Malcolm X was making. But as a Christian and also as an African American, you know, I take great peace in the fact that shortly before either of them died, there's this coming together of them, the two of them, and there's a historic picture, I believe, where they met briefly at Congress. And you know, for them to have that embrace maybe 5 or 7 years earlier probably would not have happened. But I believe that from that standpoint, the relationship between blacks and Jews in the United States perhaps started taking different paths. And what my generation of Christians are doing are trying to reinforce those alliances that we had, because there is obviously a similar history of shared experiences. And you know, so I believe that this is an incredible time for there to be a reintroduction of our relationship, because there are many blacks within the Christian community that they love Israel. I mean, everything about our community speaks of that, particularly, you know, from the religious paradigm. All of our names are named after churches or mountains or hills in Israel. You know, we are always reading the Bible written by all the Jewish leaders that God chose as prophets or apostles to pen, you know, the biblical text. But what I'm trying to do is to encourage more and more African Americans to do just like I did in 2006. Take the additional step and go to Israel, because it's so very, very important to become educated. And I think that was the message that I took back from that hallowed stage of the Independence Hall in Israel. I came back to Nashville and I began to tell everybody I know, first of all, you need to get educated. You need to get educated about Israel, about the Jewish people, not only their hopes, but the problems that they're experiencing. We need to get educated about the increase of anti-Semitism. And I don't care if it's in any form of society, we must get educated. We need to learn a little bit of Hebrew. That's not going to hurt anything. You know, learn about Israel, learn the geography, know the difference between Lot, Jerusalem, Haifa. Go there, experience it, and then make those connections with the history of Israel as well. And having gone to Israel so many times as I have now only makes me want to go back again. And I really believe that the Spirit of the Lord pervades in Israel. Not only in Jerusalem, everybody is, Jerusalem is Jerusalem, but in Tel Aviv, I believe that the presence of God is in Tel Aviv. Yeah, they're a little more secular oriented in the culture and the society, but all of the land of Israel is holy ground from where I see it. Well, I also would encourage all Christians to really get engaged. If you haven't gone to Israel, you obviously need to go to Israel. You need to experience the land, experience the people, and I thank God for organizations like PJTN. Had it not been for Lori Moore and the staff at PJTN, and of course the Jewish Federation of Nashville, I would not have made that first trip probably until way later in my life. But as a result of having done that, now I see how important activism really is, and getting involved and getting educated and learning not only of, as I said, the hopes of Israel, but what are the challenges, what are the hostile forces that are surrounding Israel? What are the terroristic organizations that are the ones with big names and the ones with not so big names that pose an incredible threat against peace, not only in Israel, but throughout the Middle East and the rest of the world. So I believe we need to raise up a generation of Christian activists that love the land of Israel, love the people of Israel, and use every sector of their lives to get engaged. I don't care if you're a business person, you need to take your company to Israel. You might learn something. Some of the greatest business ideas come from the land of Israel. When it comes to the realm of education, what our children are being taught, I don't care if it's in college or if it's in a middle school, in a public school sector or whatever. What are the issues? What are the textbooks actually saying? Who's writing the textbooks? Who's behind them? And what are they saying about the original people of the book? What are they saying? This is so very important. Christians must get engaged. Yes, we've been engaged in government and we've gotten involved in politics, but we need to take it even beyond that, looking for a wider sphere to actually become active in the hopes and the aspirations of the song Hatikva that the Jewish people love. And I believe for many, many Christian activists, it's becoming one of our greater songs as well in our repertoire. But also getting people to see that we need to get engaged in media, social media, and tell the truth about Israel. I remember when I was coming up in my household, there was this statement that a man with an experience is never at the mercy of a man with an argument. And I really believe that what that speaks is the fact that once a person has had a physical encounter at a particular place like Israel, no one can argue you down when you've been there before and you've learned, you've met people. You've seen the hopes for unity within Israel between all of the people groups of Israel, whether it's the Armenians, the Christians, the Jews, the Muslims, or whoever, And this is just so very, very important. So I encourage all Christians, listen, make that first trip, because I'm going to tell you, you make the first one, you're going to make another one.